to invite the Reverend Barb Ballenger, a member of the PAIPL Board of Directors and Associate for Spiritual Formation and Care at the Church of St. Martin in the Field in Chestnut Hill, Pennsylvania, who worked with her congregation and PAIPL to develop a training manual to organize environmental efforts. This document, which is still in its nascent stage, includes building a philosophy around creation care, as well as motivational guidelines for committees and congregations. It considers resources, success stories, partners, and more. So we're going to hear from her as we brainstorm and explore opportunities to transfer these directives to environmental initiatives inside and outside your own faith institution. So Barb, we're so pleased to have you here. Thank you so much. We look forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. I actually got promoted. I'm now the associate rector at St. Martin in the Field. So it just cuts down all the words on my name tag, which is very nice. So makes things a little simpler. But I'm very happy to be with you. I am also a former board member. I was president of the board of PAIPL, and I was there at the very beginning of PAIPL 10 years ago, when it was just a gleam in the eye of the national organization. And it was a group of people throughout Pennsylvania who gathered at Penn State for an academic conference that was looking at religion and climate change, and became a group of people that wanted to work together throughout the state, and became a state organization that's 10 years old this year. So very exciting to combine all of these loves of mine, PAIPL, St. Martin in the Fields, climate care, all into one resource. So I'm really happy to speak with everyone about that today. I thought we'd start with an opening prayer, and I'm going to share my screen for most of this. So sadly, I won't be able to see everybody once I do that. But I did want to, since this is going to be about this toolkit, we're going to take a look at it. But we're going to start with this prayer. And what I would like you to do is pray this prayer with me at home. And the way you can do this is if you will all mute and just choose a part of the prayer that you would like to pray along with. We're going to have a couple voices that can be heard leading this prayer, but if you would like to read every other line from wherever you are. But we'll start by muting, and then David and Courtney and I will be the lead voices in this prayer together. This is from the Climate Blessing from Interfaith Power and Light. All right, let us pray. We hold
brothers and sisters who suffer from storms and droughts intensified by climate change.
We hold
all species that suffer.
We hold
world leaders delegated to make decisions for life.
We pray
that the web of life may be mended through courageous actions to limit carbon emissions.
We pray
for right actions for adaptation and mitigation to help our already suffering Earth community.
We pray
that love and wisdom might inspire my actions and our actions as communities, so that we may, with integrity, look into the eyes of brothers and sisters and all beings and truthfully say, we are doing our part to care for them and the future of the children.
May love transform us and our world with new steps towards life. We pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. It's a prayer that I think captures what is in people's hearts, what we ultimately want to be doing with this work. And this little toolkit that we're going to be looking at today gives us just some techniques, some things to use together. One thing I do is I do want to take a look at some of the comments in the chat. What kinds of things are we seeing, Courtney and David? You could just read out a few of those things for us.
So I loved Wendy Greenspan saying how to get people excited about systematic work, not just how can I personally recycle more, but how can we all make political changes for just green transition? I thought that was beautiful.
Great. What else is in there?
I'll let Courtney read some off because I'm afraid that if I go off screen, it might change the recording. So I'll let.
Oh, okay. Okay. How do we motivate our congregants to get engaged politically to advocate for progressive climate policies? And so one thing that I would say is how do we invite people in rather than calling them out, right? Which is a concept that we're finding maybe works better than sort of finger pointing. How to convince the majority of the members that saving money is not the only framework for making decisions. Looking to what is right in the long term. And can we separate the needs of people from common perceptions about people needing to take care of themselves? Here's something very specific to our area, loss of trees to development in tridiferen and the use of lawn pesticides and herbicides. I am always concerned with understanding what narratives will engage with my community and constituents, how to communicate in a way that reaches folks. Engaging people who are not in the environmental choir. This is important stuff we're talking about and everybody should be interested and they're not.
Wonderful. How about like two more?
Okay. Where's the most effective place to put our energies? What are other congregations doing to advance this cause? How can we engage during a pandemic? And how do we inspire the next generation?
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. Great questions. I don't know if I'll be able to answer any of them or all of them in this conversation, but we will be looking at a way to think about engaging faith communities. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at the Toolkit for Climate Action, One Congregation Story and a Toolkit for Your Congregation. And this is the latest draft. It is almost complete. There's a little bit of tweaking to do. And this was developed by PAIPL in collaboration with the Church of St. Martin in the Fields in Philadelphia, where I'm the associate rector. I've been on the staff for 6 years. I've been ordained for 1 year. And before that, I was an associate for spiritual formation and care as a layperson. And have been involved in this effort all while I've been at St. Martin's. But this toolkit uses St. Martin's as a case study to illustrate how a faith community might begin engaging its members in climate justice. PAIPL's former executive director, Allison Cornish, worked with St. Martin's to develop a variety of approaches to planning, inviting, educating, and involving its members in climate justice work with the goal of helping other faith communities develop their own unique approaches to the work. So this was looking at some things that St. Martin was doing, but with the idea of how could others use these things as tools. I know that, let me see, I don't know if I've had a chance to look at all the participants, but I do know that we have some members of the St. Martin's Climate Action Team with us. So feel free, gang, to chime in whenever I'm at a loss for words or you remember it differently than me. But they are on the call today. And so if you have questions for them, feel free to articulate those as well. As Allison puts it in, she's done most of the writing for this toolkit, Allison Cornish. And as she puts it elsewhere in the document, this resource is less of a recipe and more of a cooking lesson. And I think this is a really important way to look at this toolkit. And we're going to take a little tour in a bit. But the thing is that those of us who are using this won't be making exactly the same thing. Right? We're not all going to make a souffle. We're all not going to make a banana split, but we're going to have a sense of how to use the cooking tools and techniques, the kinds of things that allow us to find what's in the cupboards and how to use them. We'll have some similar techniques to use and adapt to your setting, your faith tradition. So the main thing to keep in mind here is that what the St. Martin story is just really a jumping off point to light some fires in your own story. So if this whole document here is a cooking lesson, then I'm just going to give you a tour of the kitchen. And we're going to look at a few examples from the toolkit to show you how St. Martin's story introduces an idea or an approach, and then how the toolkit helps you to make it your own. So that's where we're going to try to get. But first of all, we're going to start with a secret ingredient that every faith community needs. I don't know if Greg is on the call, but this is Greg Williams. And Greg Williams is the climate action team at St. Martin in the Fields, secret ingredient. He is, I've worked in several faith communities in the Episcopal Church and in the Catholic Church. And I've worked in other communities as well. And one thing I know is that the most effective projects in any given faith community often start with one enthusiastic person, or if you're lucky, maybe a couple enthusiastic people who really care about something and want to engage people on it. And in our case at St. Martin in the Fields and also at PAIPL, this person was Greg Williams, is Greg Williams. So Greg founded the climate action team at St. Martin's in 2015 after attending the march that you see him on, the People's Climate March in New York City. And my husband, Jess, and my daughter were also somewhere in that crowd. They didn't all know each other yet. But Greg was marching. He was carrying notes with fears and hopes printed upon them. And that picture in the center is his granddaughter, Tallulah, the reason that he was marching, and still the reason I know that he does this work. Greg became a board member of PAIPL. Right now he works in volunteers in Central Pennsylvania doing climate or habitat restoration, which is one of his passions. And the reason I'm showing you that is that you need a Greg. It really helps to have a secret ingredient. You know, you might have a Greg on your committee. You might be Greg, or you just need to know that one Greg with their passion and energy can energize a whole movement. So no matter what the techniques are, no matter what the tools are, no matter what's in the cupboards, you need people that have passion and commitment and creativity. So that's the secret ingredient. I want to talk a little bit about how the toolkit came about. How did we end up having St. Martin's as a case study? And you remember before COVID, because a lot of this toolkit and a lot of these things happen before COVID hits. But before COVID, St. Martin in the Fields would have about maybe 220 to 230 people attending on a Sunday, spread out among 3 services. Sometimes as many as 300 people if we had a 4th service in the evening. And that makes an Episcopal church kind of a medium size to stocky. That meant that St. Martin's would punch a little bit above its weight when it came to programs and big ideas. And one of those big ideas at St. Martin's was the climate action team, which started in 2015. Now, I mentioned Greg, and there were a few people that were kind of getting excited about climate action at the time, and they were beginning to gather and talk after this People's Climate March, which was very catalytic in the country. And at the same time, our rector, the Reverend Jarrett Kerbel, was inviting the parish to vote on justice issues that it wanted to engage on. So he was wanting our members to get involved with some things, but to really kind of focus so that we could all work together and kind of put our energies together on particular things that we all agreed on were important. So we had a vote. And the parish decided that it wanted to work on education, and it wanted to work on hunger and poverty, and it wanted to work on climate change. Those were its top issues. So as a result of that, we had a little mandate coming from our parish where we knew people cared about the issue, which was really important. From that, we had an email list of maybe 50 people who said that they were interested in climate change, which is really a wonderful thing to have. But in reality, there were not 50 people coming to climate action team meetings. There were maybe 6 to 8 people. And that meant that you had a few people that were really committed, and you had a lot of folks out there that were kind of interested and knew that it was an important issue. But all of those things made kind of a unique environment for St. Martin's to work with PAIPL on this project. The other thing that we had was our community engagement process, which at our parish was a long-standing committee that did a lot of funding of local programs and justice programs and service programs. And the parish was moving towards wanting to not just be a funder, but to be a community that engaged in the work that it wanted to see done. And that particular value, that wanting to move towards engaging the parish towards its values, really became a way of thinking about, well, how could we create a process where people could really kind of get involved and learn to get involved in one of these issues. And so when it came to climate change, we had this realization that maybe St. Martin's could provide some of its community engagement funds to PAIPL to develop a toolkit for congregations to use to organize their climate work. And a great place for PAIPL to start would be with us, because we needed lots of help in figuring out how we could engage our parish in climate work. And so we thought, if perhaps we could work together and develop some processes, maybe we could share those with others, again, as the cooking lesson, that here's some things that you can try, not necessarily bake this souffle. And so that's what we got. We worked together with Allison Cornish for 4 years, and Allison introduced to us several activities and processes that we tried. We came up with some things that we worked with, and Allison took notes, and she created this toolkit. Most of it sort of tells the story of what St. Martin's worked on. And then at the end, there are specific resources that you can use to engage with it yourself. So this is the table of contents, and you can see that most of these Roman numerals are looking at the case study of St. Martin's experience in different areas. So you have a reflection from our rector on why the Episcopal Church needs to be involved in climate justice. There are reflections on why congregations should be involved and what the community engagement program was doing with transforming the whole parish. And then we have some topics around starting, how we got started, how we got organized, how we grew, what it means to work with intergenerational groups, how we planned, how we stayed flexible, working with others and partners. And I think that's, here we go, a little bit more. Advocacy, which some folks mentioned. the gifts that faith communities bring to the work. So this is all sort of engaging in St. Martin's story. And then the toolkit here at the end are a variety of resources that line up so that if you were going to work with this document, you would have some things that would allow you to reflect on your own community. What I would recommend if you're going to work with this document is to maybe get a little group together and just sort of read through it in a couple sessions, not in one sitting, but just kind of work through the story of St. Martin's, considering it that it is a case study. And after each section, just think about what resonates with you, what's happening in your community, where might there be similarities or differences, or what seems to be lighting a fire in your own creative world. Because the whole point of this toolkit is not to have a model or a cookie cutter to use, but really to have something that lights your own fires and your own ideas that you can begin to try some things out. That's sort of the whole reason for this to be. So what I thought I would do is look at just a couple examples from the toolkit to see how the story lines up with the tools in the end, so you can see the structure and how to use it. Okay. Are there any questions at this point before I launch in? And you can put those either in the chat, or I don't know if people have an unmute capability right now, so you might need to
They should be able to unmute themselves right now if they wanted to.
Okay, so if you need to yell something out, you can unmute and toss out a question at any time, or you can put things in the chat. Courtney's going to monitor that for us. We're good?
We're good.
All right. Excellent. Then I thought that we would look at time permitting, organizing, and growing, and possibly planning ahead. So organizing, I'm going to look at page, oops, this is growing. Let's try again, 15. Here we go. So if you were reading this, we're not going to read this whole text, but if you were engaging with this document, you would read the story of how St. Martin in the Fields uses a technique that is from community organizing called the one-on-one interview. And you would read about how we did it, and then you would see some resources that would help you do it. I'll tell you a little bit about why one-on-one interviews are important at St. Martin in the Fields, and was something that we used at the start of our climate action work. Our rector, Jarrett Kerbel, likes to say, don't advertise, organize. Which means don't put up a flyer and expect people to come. Don't send out a notice and think that people are going to show up to your meeting, but get to know the people who are most interested in your work. Find out what they like, find out who they are, create a relationship, share yourself with them, and then you will know who would like to be involved and in what ways. So the one-on-one was a way that we could take that email list of 50 people who said they were interested and find out, what is your interest really? And we did this in a very informal way at St. Martin's. We would just call some people up, set up some time to have coffee back before COVID, when we could actually meet together in person over coffee, but you could do that. Actually, I've had plenty of coffee and Zoom conversations, but just had a real informal conversation about why people are interested in climate change, what they're concerned about, what their hopes are, what kinds of things they like to do. And the person doing the interview would explain that about themselves as well. So we found we would take notes, we would jot them down, we would actually put them in a little Google form so we could keep track of it, and we could have a sense of what the growing narrative is in our community. And one of the things, I think there was a question in the original sharing was, how can we share narratives in a way that resonates with our community? One of those ways is to know the narrative of your community, so that you can see where the story comes together, where the stories may be already out there. So so if you read this whole thing, that's what you would find out about St. Martin's. But if you wanted to know how to do a one-on-one visit yourself, you might use this tool that is in the toolkit, and it is here on page 35. And Allison provided this outline to create one-to-one visits. This is a little more detailed than what we used on the climate action team. This comes from franciscanaction.org, but there's a wonderful tool here that you can read through and fill out that explains in more detail why one-on-one visits are helpful, how to arrange a visit with a person in your faith community, what to do when you're having your conversation, how to follow up, how to close the visit, how to reflect and evaluate. So this tool is in the toolkit for your use. It helps you develop this idea further and make sure it's something that matches your community. So that's one example of how the toolkit works. Another area that you'll find in the toolkit is how St. Martin's would recruit and get the message out beyond those very specific interested people that we would discover through one-on-ones. How do you get the word out farther? How do you get that narrative out into the community? And how do you begin to educate and maybe help reorient people from some of the places where they tend to get stuck? So this little section, if you were to read it, would tell you about how the climate action team would use things that were already established in the community at St. Martin's and sort of try to find the way to fit climate action in there, into something that was already there. How do you collaborate with people that are already doing things in your community? Or how do you provide sort of value added to educational opportunities that your faith community might offer? So in the Episcopal Church, that is the parish forum, which some people call Sunday school, others call adult education. But again, talking about the days before COVID, when we could meet together and gather in adult education at St. Martin's, 9:15 on a Sunday morning, we would have our parish forum. And every week that would be a different topic that we might have speakers coming in from the outside. But as somebody who had to plan those parish forums, I often appreciated it if a parishioner came up to me and said, I've got an idea. I've got a speaker. I'd like to engage the community in this topic. And so finding what was already there and using that parish forum as a way to do education on climate change and faith became something that the climate action team turned to maybe twice a year and was able to offer programs for the parish when it was expecting to learn on a Sunday morning. Here's a few of the things that they did. Whoops, come back here. So when Pope Francis put out his encyclical, Laudato Si, on care for our common home, that became a wonderful opportunity to do adult education and to explain what was in that document at a parish forum, and then follow that up with a reading group. And that was something that it was very easy for members of the climate action team to put together and then to lead. Or if you don't want to lead the program yourself, bring in a speaker. We had folks come in from the Climate Reality Project or from Penn Environment to talk about ways that climate change could be understood in a very accessible way, in a very hopeful way, and also in a very local way. So this is all to say that the parish forum is just one example of a place where the climate action team was able to use an existing program at St. Martin's and insert climate action into it. Okay, so that's the case study. Then if you were going to look at how you might do that in your setting, you might look at this upcycling worksheet. And let me see if I can get the right page here. I think it's right here on page 44. There we go. This worksheet is a great little tool that Allison developed that allows a little group that's looking for how might we get our message out there to kind of inventory all the different kinds of things that a faith community might do, that there might be happening in their faith community, and then have a little conversation among themselves with, well, where would the climate crossover be? So for example, if your community is involved in a fuel bank support, for example, if you're working with people that to help them be able to afford more affordable fuel options, and you're already doing that as a community, how do you begin to turn that into an opportunity for conversation about the bigger issue of climate change, or places where it intersects, backgrounds, things that are happening in the community? So this little tool lists all sorts of places where you might be able to have a crossover or an upcycle, as we call it, with climate. I mentioned the adult education hour. That's how we used our forum. Coffee hour, when we can get back to having coffee hours together again, become wonderful places to model using sustainable products, washing dishes instead of throwing things out, composting leftovers, and ways of having conversations around that. So this list is just a nice way of going through that and having your own conversation. Okay. All right. Any questions so far on how this baby works?
So the feedback we're hearing is that this is lovely, and that one-on-ones are great for relationship building and connecting, and that they're glad there are resources to help facilitate that. So
good to know. Okay. I think we've got time for one more. This section that we're going to look at is about how we might vision and capture successes. How might we plan ahead? How might we think about what we even want to do in a particular year? And one of the things that Allison helped us put together, and that the climate action team has used just about every year until it just seems like, doesn't it seem like we have like a before COVID and an after COVID? Before COVID, when we were able to meet together, we would have a little retreat every year. And we have a little format for that that's also shared in the toolkit. But it was a way that we could gather our members, 6 to 10 of us, not a ton, but be able to begin prayerfully, talk about what we were hoping to do in that year, review what we'd done in the past, and begin to think about what kinds of activities and efforts we might want to engage in the future. And we had a couple rules of thumb that we used in this. One was that we were not going to do anything unless we had somebody on our committee who was willing to be a champion of this particular activity. So we weren't going to plan outside of our capacity. We weren't going to plan something that, we would tap somebody else in the parish to do, but we weren't willing to do it. Often this takes the form of, let's get the youth to do it. But that's not ever going to get anything done unless you've got some youth on your committee saying, hey, we want to do this. So what the climate action team decided was, we're only going to do the things that people on the committee feel like they will do. And if somebody wants to spearhead it and take the lead, then we will support them. And when we meet, we will make sure that we're preparing for that particular activity and that particular effort. That was at least a good way to start. That didn't mean that that was the only thing that we did, or we didn't get pulled into bigger ideas or sucked into other things that might be happening in the community, but it did allow us to have a sense that we're going to do what we have the capacity to do, and that's okay. That's okay. Another thing that we used that sort of connected to using the parish forum was that we would sit down and we would look at the calendar that had been sketched out for the year. And faith communities, staffs plan ahead. They get things on their calendars way in advance. And when you get a copy of that calendar, you can see sort of when the the education programs are. You can see when the various seasons are beginning. You can see what kinds of things may be happening that might have a crossover, that climate might be a piece that you could add and support or in collaboration. So we would spend a lot of time looking at our calendar and planning based on that. So that's the case study. Now, if you wanted to look at some tools that go with that, there is a retreat agenda that you can plan your own sort of planning retreat around. There's an activity tracker that we used and an interest survey. And there's also this collaborative calendar here. And that is over here on page 52. And this is a wonderful, just a wonderful bunch of calendars that you can kind of look at and see what is happening throughout the year typically. This allows you to think about when to plan programming when people are most attuned to pay attention. So you might do something on the World Day of Prayer, or we do a lot of things on the solstice. We have a beautiful solstice walk that we do every year, and people are looking for something to do, some way to mark the sacredness of the shortest day and the longest night. And the Climate Action Team invites a walk down Forbidden Drive using the prayer of Compline, which is an Episcopal evening prayer, and praying for the earth and the environment. So all sorts of ways to connect with things that are happening on the calendar, things that are already in our tradition, activities that people already have a yearning for. We found that when you do that, you're able to get a more attuned audience. So this little tool lets you kind of look at what might be going on. And then it also gives you some spaces for making your own notes about what works for your community, what kinds of feasts and fasts are happening, what kinds of ideas and goals might you have around those by months. So again, St. Martin's is the case study, but the tool is really about you. Okay, so those are just three things in this big long list of tools. There's information in here on advocacy and some of the other things that some of you might have been talking about and hoping about, but the idea again is to make sure that you're planning based on your own community. So I'm just going to look at some of the concluding points in this toolkit. The thing is, PAIPL is an interfaith organization, which means we come from everywhere. We come from all sorts of faith traditions and experiences and backgrounds. And it's our hope that this toolkit can be applied sort of across the board, because they're tools that you really use for you. But there's some things that kind of work for everybody. And see, these are some of these conclusions, bullet points here. But you want to know the way that your congregation works best, how you celebrate, what you build on, what reinforces your strengths. And if it seems like it's kind of a mystery as to why things work or don't work, understanding sort of that sense of the culture that you're in and what motivates people in general will help you begin to speak the language of climate change in words that people already understand as members of your faith community. Another thing, and I think, Courtney, you said this in a different way. I think when you talked about drawing people in as opposed to leaving people out, another way of saying that is to put down one of the old blunt instruments of religion, which was shame and guilt. One of the reasons why our faith communities may be shrinking is because we maybe spent too much time using a tool that harmed and not enough time using tools that engage. And so the idea of shame and guilt, even though when we look at a warming world that is suffering the way it is, it really is shameful, and we'd really love to blame the people that are at fault, but it kind of comes back to all of us having participated in something that we maybe didn't realize fully what we were harming. So instead of shame and guilt, what does it mean to inspire, to engage, to invite, and to hope together? Because those are the sharp instruments, those are the effective instruments of faith communities. And I think those are the kinds of things that we can reach into our own communities and use. We need to know that no matter what the community, it's going to be diverse. There are going to be many points of entry into climate work. And so when you're thinking about engaging your community, there's not just one door that people are going to go through, but some read, some learn visually, some have a lot of time, some have a tiny little bit of time. And one of the reasons why PAIPL puts out a regular email called a sip of sustenance was because maybe that's all we have space for, but we really need something hopeful in that space. So finding all those points of entry and maybe not hitting them all, but hitting a few so that more people in your community can engage. Another really important thing to keep in mind when you're doing this work in a faith community is that, we're all gonna fail at different times. I mean, we're up against something that is so challenging. So being willing to make mistakes and being willing to try again, being willing to learn from one another. Another thing that I think is one of the key gifts of people of faith, of people that gather around these values and this something bigger than we are, is that there's room in those spaces for loss and for mourning and for lament. So one of the beautiful spaces that we can create in our faith communities is spaces where people can articulate the pain of climate injustice, of climate pain and climate change, and what it means to be able to sit with one another as we lament those realities and as we hope for something new. Those are really big skills that faith communities typically already have. And the question is, how do we employ those in climate action? Another point here is using language, activities, and materials that are age appropriate, knowing that we have diverse communities and children are already doing this work. So how do we speak to young people and teens? How do we grow and learn from what they know? And finally, this whole point is grounding the work in your faith tradition. So this is the opportunity for all of us to go deeper into our own faith traditions and some of the tools that are already in those toolboxes that help us to connect back to climate, to connect back to care of the earth, to connect back to a creation that is made good and at the end of the day is still good. So all of these little pieces are here to inspire and to, as I said, light fires, your own kitchen that you can explore and try some things out. I'm just going to end with one little quote and then open it up for, I think it looks like we might have maybe 12 minutes for some questions and answers. But this was just, I think, a little quote that is a little earlier in the toolkit that I think is a nice concluder. And that is, when there is so much damage, so many needs, and the problems are so vast, it's easy to feel overwhelmed by climate change. And that's why faith communities have a particular role to play in addressing the crisis upon us, and especially in helping to sustain enthusiasm, energy, and commitment to the issue. So it's our hope at PAIPL and at St. Martin in the Fields that some of these experiences we have will be a catalyst and an invitation to help you engage your communities in climate justice and to go deeper in the work. So thank you for being so attentive. I have no idea what's going on in those little blocks. So I think I'm going to do is stop share so we can kind of look at each other, if that's okay. And I'd love to hear what you're thinking and some of the questions that you have.
So Barb, I think one of the questions is just, can you talk about how this will be rolled out, how this toolkit will be rolled out and people can access it?
Yeah, great. So, so there is an immediate rollout and there is a later rollout. So the immediate thing is right now we have kind of a draft here. And what we would really love is we would love it if we could have some previewers and reviewers, people who could look at it and think about it in terms of their community and say, this really works for me, or you know what, this really is not sensitive to our needs in this place. It's not to provide an opportunity to tear it apart and rebuild it from scratch, but we would love, you know, what a good reviewer does, says this is its strengths, this is where it could be a little stronger, and that will help us tweak what we have so that we're ready to have a final edition in, you know, maybe a month and a half. And or if there's some big things, we can think about revisions in the future. But so that means that any of you that are on the call that would like to be a reviewer or a previewer, all you need to do is email David Hain Menendez, who will send you a copy of the draft. And there it is at info@PAIPL, and you can review it and send us your thoughts back. So we're looking for that over about the next month or a month and a half. So that would be great. And then when it is ready to roll, when all the links are linking and all the little final tweaks are done, then we're going to make that. We'll send out some information in our newsletter, and we'll let you know the various ways that you can get the final copy and how you might use that. So, does that answer that question? See, to what extent
is your concept here that the group that you're going to be applying this within part of a church? Is it part of a religious community, or does it extend beyond that? You use the word community quite a bit, and I'm just wondering, does that extend beyond the church where you start this, or does it go into the general community that's multiple churches and multiple views?
This is really designed to be used in a particular faith community. So I would say,
church.
Right. Well, yeah, a church, a synagogue. It could be a community group that's meeting around faith reflection, but this was specifically developed so that faith communities could have something to gather around. Since there have already things that unite them, it's a good way to use that uniting function of being a faith community and working on climate change in those capacities. So it works best, I would say, in faith communities.
It was developed within a context of St. Martin's, and of course it could be applied to other churches or other synagogues as whatnot as well.
Yeah.
But it's generally conceived in a way that is limited to one religious entity.
Well, I would say that St. Martin's is the case study, so it doesn't mean that the only way to do this work is to be an Episcopal congregation in Chestnut Hill. Right, so the tools in the toolkit are tools that should be useful to any faith tradition or any group. But the idea is that St. Martin's experience is kind of a jumping off point, and that those that work in faith communities are going to find that they may have some similar kinds of structures, even though they're not the same faith tradition. They might not have the same kind of creed, but they may have adult education, they may have advocacy, they may have the ability to bring people together around particular topics. The other thing is that our community, our faith communities also can work together across difference. And so that's the interfaith nature of PAIPL, right? So some of these tools can really be used to maybe work across some of our different faith traditions, but do some things together. Hope that answers that question.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. To what
Barb,
extent?
could I jump in for a quick second?
Yeah, who's jumping in? Oh, look, it's Greg.
Thanks for the shout out, by the way. But for instance, in Philadelphia, there's a Philadelphia chapter, which involves people from 8 or 9 different churches and some people who aren't churched. And I think they follow some of these same guidelines. They have an annual retreat. They do a variety of things. And these tools can be used outside of one congregation as well as being designed just for one congregation.
Yeah. Great.
So Elsie Yoder had 2 really good questions. And Elsie, if you want to say them, you can, or else I can just read them. What would you like?
So yes, I did have several questions. One is about how much people were interested in working at a level sort of beyond the congregation, policy level, whether it's city, state, federal. Was there much of an appetite for that or not?
At different times, there were, and I think it helps when there is a very specific ask happening in terms of advocacy. So if people are just beginning to learn how to write to their congressperson, for example, or what the issue is to weigh in on, I think we found it was easier to engage people at St. Martin's if there was a campaign already happening, or if there was an ask that was already in place, that we might have people sign it's that many points of entry. So people who would be willing to sign cards or write letters. But we also had folks that would get involved in PAIPL's bigger advocacy work. We had at least one member, my husband Jess, who I think is on this call somewhere, who was on the annual bike trip and did advocacy on the Hill. So being able to support that person doing advocacy who was from the parish was also a way to engage people in some of those issues. So I would say that across the board, there are a lot of ways to give people a taste of advocacy, and often you might have a couple people that are really interested in doing the sustained advocacy, developing the relationships with elected officials. One of the pieces that we did through PAIPL was we hosted one of PAIPL's sustained advocacy workshops. And that was a way to invite people from St. Martin's who are working on other issues like education or poverty or refugee resettlement, to see how some of those issues intersect with climate change and how the tools of advocacy could be used by everybody. That's a real scattershot answer to your question, but I guess it's to say that people have a variety of interests, and if you can kind of bring them along from where they are, you can kind of grow a sense of how to do advocacy together. If that makes sense.
Yes, thank you very much.
What else are you seeing in the chat there, Courtney?
So that was, go ahead.
This is Chuck. I wanted to ask how you, or if you included your building staff, building managers, and custodial people into the process so that they could bring ideas out.
We did, and that may be elsewhere in the toolkit or one of those intersectional places. How do you have this moment where you can have a climate conversation? One for us where that happened was there was a period where the church was looking to do some expansion and was having some listening sessions about what kinds of it was with architects. So it was a listening session with all sorts of parishioners on what kinds of things they wanted to see built at St. Martin's. And the climate action team, they had little tables that would talk about different topics. For example, what do you want to see in education? And what do you want to see in the music? And climate action team made sure it had a, what do you want to see in terms of climate change? And so, so we were able to gather people and have conversations around how should our building be sustainable? If we do building, if we do an expansion, how do we make sure that we are energy efficient? How do we make sure that we're talking about lights? having a conversation with parishioners so that you could kind of hear from them that that was a concern of theirs too. So that kind of falls under the see where you have an in and take it kind of opportunity. So that is one of the pieces we did. I don't know if it shows up right in the toolkit, but I know it is a strategy that we used. And we also had a member of the Buildings and Grounds committee on the climate action team. So inviting people in to be on the team who maybe also have knowledge of other parts of the congregational life, especially building and grounds, was really important.
I have a question.
So,
This is Joy Baxter.
Yeah.
We'll wrap up with Joy's question. Thanks, Joy.
Great.
Do you have experience spreading creation care programs to other congregations that don't already have a green team, or how to inspire other congregations to start that work?
So I think that it's the hope of this toolkit to do some of that. And even if you don't have a team at all, maybe you have just a couple people that are interested in this issue and you belong to the same faith community, to even just read through what this little climate action team at St. Martin's did and begin to look for what are the things that two of us could do, or what maybe we're at the point of growing. Maybe what are some of the things that this little climate action team at St. Martin's used to grow? What could we do too? So I think the hope is that some of these things might allow some of that growing from scratch, starting that climate action team, or that even couple people that are interested in doing something. The main thing is that you can always begin somewhere, even if it's just a one-on-one conversation, so I think that's the hope of this document.
So I think that works if you can find those people in the congregation. My question really is if you see, for example, I've reached out to other congregations in my community asking if they have green teams, if they have creation care. Say, no, we're doing other things.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any, besides getting the, finding those people who might be a member of that congregation who are also interested in this and, getting the seed of this going, have you had any experience or any tips on how to get that spark going in that congregation?
Well, Greg had mentioned probably another model, which is what you have right here, gathered here, and what we have in Philadelphia, and that is if we have a lot of people that might be the only person in their congregation that are interested in climate, or maybe they don't even have a congregation. I mean, they have a spirituality, but they don't necessarily have a church or a faith community that they're involved in, but they do want to work on climate from that perspective. When you have a community group like you have on the main line, or like the little chapter that we have in Philly, those become the places where you can do some of this work and sustain the hope and work with other people until maybe you can find some other folks, maybe in your congregation, that want to do something on a congregational level. So you don't have to be at a particular faith community or a particular congregation to make this happen. Climate work in the name of spirit can happen anywhere, and it mainly is relational work. So having a little group to meet with and to sustain and to grow with can sometimes help you kind of stay in it until you can develop it in your own community, or maybe you never do and you just grow it with your interfaith group that's meeting locally. I don't know if that helps, but that's the answer I got.
And so I just wanted to add something. I am developing an ecumenical Lenten series in this case, and this is around gun violence awareness, but I think it could also be around environmental issues in a particular town, just one town, inviting all the congregations to send people to participate. And that way you get people who are interested and can grow that way. I actually am really excited about this, and then want to take it from ecumenism to interfaith. But I'm just starting with the Christians because that's my wheelhouse. So I'm excited about that. I see that we're at 8:35. I want to honor everybody's time. I want to thank Barb so much for sharing this journey, this journey and this story with the group. We're looking forward to it rolling out. David, thank you for being here. Everybody's excited. You can be in touch with Barb if you have any further questions. And
reach me?
I'm sorry?
I'm just going to put my contact information in the chat.
Perfect.
And please do remember that if you want to be the reviewing people, the beta testers, to email me at the info@paipl.org. And to Joy's point, I mean, that's also what PAIPL is here for. If you have something, a project, or even what Courtney just said, if you have the seed of a project that you want to grow ecumenically or interfaith, we're there for it. I mean, just tell us what it is. And that's, the more ideas you give us, the more we can run with them, the more we can grow them, the more capacity we can build for them, all of those things. I mean, you come to us and we will help provide the resources and facilitate and the funding if we have it available, and so on. I mean, that's a significant part of what we're here for. So please, anybody on this call or anybody that you know, let me know.
Thank you, everybody, and good luck in all that you do. And thank you for all you do. You wouldn't be on this call if you didn't care from the bottom of your heart for this creation and this earth. So I thank you for your work and your commitment.
Thank you all for joining
joining us.
Bye-bye.
Blessings,
Thank
everyone.
you, Barb.